Hello listeners, welcome back to Luke's English Podcast. This episode is called Haiku in English 2, and it's the continuation of an episode I started in February this year, which that episode was called Haiku in English. Very imaginative stuff. So I did part 1 of this in February, and I had to abandon the first part of this because, if you remember, there was the noise of drilling and hammering from next door, which has been very annoying recently. They've been replacing all the windows in the rooms next to mine here on the top floor of this building, and it's been very annoying. I've had to cancel several episode recordings. Hopefully they won't be doing it today, but that's what caused me to abandon part 1 of this. But now the sounds of silence have returned, offering me space to come back to this Zen-like topic, which does demand a certain amount of peace and quiet. So let's continue then and finish off the Haiku in English episode that I started a couple of months ago. Several things to say at the start here. The first thing is I wanted to give you a reminder of what I said in part 1, what haiku is, some of the things I read, and what the aim of the episode is. Okay, so the whole point of this episode is that it was a chance to explore the world of haiku poetry in English, to read out some haiku, some very famous ones, some of the old traditional ones, and also some modern ones, all in English, of course. Read them out, talk about what they mean, have a bit of a ramble about each one, and teach you some English vocab that comes up in the process. Okay, haiku is a form of traditional Japanese poetry, basically, and the traditional stuff followed various sort of rules, let's say, where a certain number of syllables. It's basically a 3-line, very minimal, very short 3-line poem with 5 syllables in the first line, 7 in the second line, and 5 syllables again in the third line. Is that correct? I think that's right. More modern versions of haiku sort of don't follow those rules, and basically haiku, modern haiku, especially haiku in English, basically means just very short, maybe 3 or even 2-line poems. Okay? Now, maybe poetry isn't your thing, but I think that actually when you explore some of these, you notice that they're actually really good. They're very evocative. They express common emotions, common feelings, and little moments that we experience in our lives, and how those moments can be loaded with emotion or significance for various reasons. Haiku traditionally focus on nature, have a lot of themes of nature, describing natural scenes, and seem to express the feeling that you have when you observe the changing of the seasons, changing from spring to summer or winter to spring, things like that. More modern haiku expand to express other things, perhaps more everyday experiences and things like that. So in part 1 of this, I read through, as I said, some traditional haiku and some more modern ones. The aim of the episode is really just to teach you English as usual, give you something interesting to listen to, and explore a different medium of English. In this case, that's poetry. English exists in all these different forms, in different mediums, and I try to cover English across a range of different modes, let's say, and this time it's through the medium of poetry. The second point I wanted to make was that Lepster haikus written by my listeners, I was amazed at the response that part 1 of this episode got. If you remember, I kind of casually suggested that listeners could write in with their haikus, and some of the responses I got were incredible. I read out most of them in episode number 976, which was called Ramble Mania, a 3-hour episode, and the last hour of the episode was devoted to reading out haikus that listeners of this podcast had sent in. And I was really impressed by the haikus that a lot of my listeners sent in. So if you want to listen to those, then go back to episode 976 to check them out. But brilliant stuff. I was really impressed. So in this episode, I'm going to continue to read out some haiku by John Stevenson, following the advice of Hélène Leclerc, a Lepster from Canada, whose email inspired me to do this whole episode in the first place. Hélène writes haiku and is very inspired by the work of haiku poet John Stevenson. And so, I'm going to read out some more of his haiku in this episode. John is probably the world's leading writer of haiku in English and is a great talent. His haikus tend to focus on moments in everyday life rather than on moments of natural beauty and changing seasons like in traditional haiku. We will explore some more of his haiku in this episode, and I'll use them to teach you some English. Now, amazingly enough, this afternoon, I actually have a call scheduled with John himself. I'm going to be speaking to John Stevenson himself this afternoon. And so I thought I had to finish the haiku episode and get it all fresh in my mind once again. How did that happen? How did I end up arranging a call with John Stevenson himself? Well, Hélène from Canada, who is on, she knows John. She's met him, I think, a couple of times. She actually shared my haiku episode with John. And I'm very glad to say that he was very gracious and positive about it and expressed an interest in having a chat with me. So I took the chance to arrange a call with him, and he was happy to do that. And the call is scheduled for later this afternoon. And I'll be making a podcast with John. I'll record my conversation for you to listen to. And I've been wondering what kinds of questions I can ask him in order to allow him to reveal his process for writing his poetry, why he chooses haiku, and perhaps to reveal the thinking and experiences behind some of his work. So that is in my mind as I record this episode now. Will the John Stevenson episode, what am I going to talk about with him? How's that going to go? And also, you might be thinking, when will it be published, Luke? Will the John Stevenson episode be published next week? Maybe, maybe not. You know that I like to keep you on your toes, so we'll see, but it will turn up at some point, as long as everything goes okay and the recording actually works all right, because actually, I should know from past experience that I shouldn't count my chickens before they hatch. That's an idiom in English. To count your chickens means to assume that you've got something before you've really got it. For example, if you've got, 3 chickens and 2 eggs, and you count you're trying to count how many chickens you've got. And you think, well, I've got 1, 2, 3 chickens and these 2 eggs, but they're going to hatch and become chickens. So let's say I've got 5 chickens. You shouldn't do that because those 2 eggs might not hatch. So you shouldn't count your chickens before they hatch. Hatch is when a bird pops out of its egg, right? So that's the origin of the expression. You shouldn't count your chickens before they hatch. Just means that you shouldn't assume that you've got something before you've actually got it. So I shouldn't count my chickens before they hatch, and I shouldn't talk about podcast episodes that I haven't actually recorded yet, because of course there might be a problem with the call today. Who knows? Maybe they'll start drilling again. Maybe we'll have technical difficulties or something like that. And that something that could make the podcast recording impossible. So who knows? It might not happen, but hopefully the gods of podcasting will smile upon us. And at some point, you will be able to hear my conversation with the man who wrote so many of the interesting haiku that we have already explored in part 1 and will be reading again in this episode. I've got more. So let's continue to read haiku by John Stevenson and some other haiku as well. I've got some haiku specifically for Lepsters as well. Not by Lepsters, but for Lepsters. As ever, these will give me a chance to ramble a bit, comment on the overall meaning of the haiku, and I can pick out bits of vocabulary to teach you as well. PDF is available as usual. Okay, so let's go, let's continue. And so just to be clear, all of these ones I'm about to read are written by John Stevenson, okay, and they're all available in the various books that he's published over the years. So we continue with haiku number 29. And remember, if you were particularly moved or inspired by any of the haiku and you want to comment in the comment section, you can use the haiku numbers to help you. So this is haiku number 29. And it goes like this. Used bookstore, the creaking stairway to poetry. used bookstore, the creaking stairway to poetry. Now, by the way, one thing that you could do with this episode is repeat the haiku after me, and you'll find that there are just like various benefits to doing that for your English. Obviously, you end up just practicing some of the little features of natural English pronunciation, and you just convert passive listening into something a bit more active. For example, used bookstore. Can you actually say that with the two words linked? Used bookstore. Used bookstore. Used bookstore. You end up going de book. Used bookstore. The creaking stairway to poetry. Now this for me is just very evocative of a certain feeling that you have when you go to a used bookstore, right? A bookshop in British English, a place selling lots of books, and they're used books. So it's full of old books, maybe books, leather-bound books, or just lots of old books. And these sorts of bookshops are often made of old wood, and there might be a steep staircase. I'm thinking of a place like Shakespeare and Company, which is a famous bookshop in Paris. It's one of the most famous bookshops in the world, surely. Shakespeare and Company. It's an English language bookshop in central Paris, not far from Notre Dame Cathedral. And it's very much like this. There's several floors, lots of little nooks and crannies, and old wooden bookshelves, and certainly a couple of creaky stairways, little ladders or sets of stairs. And I don't know, it just kind of describes an atmosphere, doesn't it? The atmosphere of a used bookstore with its creaking stairway. Creaking refers to the sound that the old wooden steps would make as you walk up them, and they go like that, right? The sort of old wooden furniture that creaks. So it's just the sound that old wooden things make when you put pressure on them, creaking. Okay, yeah. I mean, it's just a nice image, isn't it? A nice feeling of climbing up some old wooden stairs, where there's the poetry section, and there is something very pleasant about sitting in an old bookshop, picking some old book of poetry and reading from the pages. I mean, it is a totally different feeling than just sitting in a Starbucks or something and swiping through short form video content on your phone. There's something very wholesome and wonderful about sitting in an old shop with creaking stairs, reading through pages of old poetry. I think it's very good for the soul, myself. Haiku number 30 goes like this. So much of what I do involves my body. So much of what I do involves my body. So this, for me, is kind of a little meditation on, maybe on aging, that as you get older and older, you do feel like this. I mean, I'm not like really old or anything. I'm middle-aged, but increasingly I am aware of the sheer inconvenience and strain of just doing anything and everything, and your body starts to feel tired. You start to feel aches and pains. And so you start to realise that everything I do, oh God, the hassle of doing everything that involves my body, my old tired body. I'm not quite there yet, but I can see, and I can see it in my parents as well, that they talk about this quite a lot. That my dad, in fact, said on the podcast recently that old age creeps up on you. It slowly arrives without you realising it, and you reach a point where just bending down to put your shoes on, or to get dressed or undressed, getting up in the morning, having to get out of bed to use the toilet in the middle of the night, showering and then drying yourself off with a towel, doing up lots of buttons all the time, and carrying bags and just all of those things start to become a bit of a strain. Your joints start creaking. I mean, they don't literally creak, but it feels like that. You do start to feel like an old set of stairs in an old used bookstore. So much of what I do involves my body. Yeah, I mean, can you relate to that, listeners? That sense of just the fatigue and the inconvenience and the hassle of having to do everything that's so physical. There's another quote, but I don't remember who it was, but something about just life gets so tiring, so much buttoning and unbuttoning, all the buttons and doing them up and undoing them. And I've got kids. One of my kids is 2, and that's very physical. Every day I take him to the daycare place and we go up the hill, and a lot of the time he wants me to carry him. So I end up carrying my bag with my heavy laptop in it, and then him, and putting him on my shoulders. There's just so much physical exertion involved in everything. So much of what I do involves my body. If something involves something, it means that thing is part of it, right? Right. So, for example, everyday life involves a lot of physical movement. Podcasting, recording a podcast involves a lot of different things. There's the recording equipment side. So you've got to get the microphone and the recording set up and all that. And then there's the actual planning of it. There's the editing. So doing a podcast involves a lot of different things. We also often say, what does that involve? And it's really a really common set of questions in English when you meet someone, to say, oh, what do you do? I think in some cultures that's considered to be a little bit sort of boring as a question, but it's one of the most common sort of small talk questions that people ask each other in England. Oh, hi, nice to meet you. How do you know Luke? Oh, that's good. Okay, so what do you do? Meaning, what's your job? And they say, oh, I'm a podcaster. I'm an English podcaster. Oh, really? Oh, what does that involve? What does that involve? Meaning, what are the things that are included in that? What's part of that? Okay, number 31. Class reunion. Everybody loved my wife. Class reunion. Everybody loved my wife. So, how do you interpret that one? Class reunion. Everybody loved my wife. Do you interpret that? I think there's maybe 2 interpretations that I can think of. One of them is quite sad. One of them is quite happy. A class reunion. This is when you meet up with all of your old schoolmates. Class reunion, right? So let's say you left school 20, 30 years ago. All those people that you were in the same class with, you've all gone off and had your different separate lives. And then, I don't know, you get an email or something like that. Someone gets in touch with you and says, we're having a class reunion. All of the kids from class 2B or whatever it was, we're all going to meet each other in this bar, and we're all going to catch up with each other. That's a class reunion. I don't know if you've ever experienced that. Have you ever done that? Have you ever had a class reunion? I've actually never done it. I would be curious. I would definitely be curious to do it, just to see how everyone, what happened to everyone. What did everyone go on to do? It would be it would be interesting to see, like, the kids who were at school were very popular. Are they still the popular ones now? How have people changed, and who are they with, and what are their life stories? That's a class reunion. So class reunion, everybody loved my wife, clearly just tells a little story that he went to a class reunion. And I think there's 2 interpretations. So the happy interpretation is that he went to the reunion and he went with his wife. And he introduced everyone to his wife, and it was very positive because they all loved her and all thought she was fantastic, which would be the happy interpretation, right? That would be a very, very happy, satisfying feeling that all these people that you used to know, that they meet your wife that you met and they all loved her, and you would feel like you'd won at life. That's the happy version. The sad version is that a class reunion, maybe you're getting together with people that you used to know. Maybe some of them you stayed in touch with, and it's a chance to meet them all again after maybe a few years. And they all tell you how much they loved your wife. But the sad thing is that your wife maybe died a few years ago and you're now single. And everyone you see says to you, oh, I just wanted to say I'm so sorry to hear about, I'm so sorry to hear about Sandra. Why is it always Sandra? That's always the name I always come up with. So sorry to hear about Sandra. We absolutely loved her. If everyone comes up and says that to you, I suppose it would be bittersweet, because it would be sad in the sense that obviously you'd lost your wife, but it would be nice in a way because people all said nice things about her. But that's interesting. Just 3 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words. And you can imagine all sorts of different emotional stories. That's what's interesting about these minimal poems, that they kind of use such brief language to paint a picture which is actually it contains quite a lot of feelings. Number 32. One of your sighs has stayed with me 40 years so far. One of your sighs has stayed with me 40 years so far. Again, another one that could have positive or negative interpretations. Let me explain what a sigh is. A sigh, that's S-I-G-H. That is when someone goes like that. Right, so one of your sighs. So I suppose he's talking to his wife, his lover or something, or someone that sighed 40 years ago and he still remembers it. It's still with him, even after 40 years. A few different interpretations. Here's a happy interpretation. Again, bittersweet. Bittersweet means something that is both happy and sad at the same time. Here's a bittersweet interpretation, that he loved this woman and she sighed. So you can sigh in a positive way, or it can be sort of happy or sad, can't it? It can be positive or negative. Someone can sigh because they're very happy. Imagine lying in bed with someone that you love and they sigh out of pleasure. Okay, and that can be obviously a very touching and moving moment where you're being intimate with someone and they sigh, and it's a very intimate and warm thing, and he remembers that. And if his wife is still alive and he's still with her, then that memory, that's a very warm and positive thing, because that feeling of the intimacy and the warmth and the closeness and the love is still with him after 40 years. So it's still fresh. Or he has this nice memory, but his wife is no longer with him. And yet he still has all these memories of these wonderful close moments in the past. So that's bittersweet. Or maybe she sighed because she was frustrated or angry with him. It could be a frustrated sigh. And again, either he's still with his wife, but there's maybe a lingering feeling of resentment, a lingering feeling of bitterness, even after 40 years. I mean, marriages are complicated things. And even after 40 years, old problems, old resentments can come to the surface and can result in a marriage breaking up even after 40 years. So maybe this is like a thing that he's remembered all this time, of a moment when she was frustrated with him, and maybe he felt that it wasn't justified, or he's got like a sort of sense of resentment, a bitterness that he's still holding on to, which maybe is going to come back. Or again, maybe this was a sigh when she was frustrated or angry with him, and yet she's no longer with him for whatever reason. That means I need to drink some water, and my timer has gone off. She's no longer with him for whatever reason. Maybe they split up, maybe she died, but he still remembers this moment when she was frustrated or angry with him, which is going to be a painful memory. One of your sighs has stayed with me 40 years so far. I suppose it's about love, right? It's about love. That love is a thing that can be a very long-term story, and moments, little moments in the past can stick with you for a long time, for good or bad. What's your interpretation of that? I'd like to know your interpretation of any and all of these poems as we go through this. So please feel free to write in the comments section which ones you like, which ones inspired you, and what were your interpretations? How do you read these? Number 33. Trying to fit in. Time for my son to practice parallel parking. This is great. I love, this is one of those observations of ordinary life with a few different meanings. There's a few layers to this. Trying to fit in. Time for my son to practice parallel parking. And there's definitely English for me to teach you here, because there's this phrasal verb, to fit in, which could have two meanings. There's the literal meaning, and then there's a slightly more idiomatic meaning. Slightly more. So, okay, what's going on here? So he is helping his son to practice parallel parking, it seems. Parallel parking. Okay, so when you're learning to drive, you have to learn various different manoeuvres in the car. Obviously, you have to learn how to just drive down the street, turn left, turn right, go, stop, and stuff like that. But then there are other slightly more tricky manoeuvres, like, for example, indicating, checking your mirror, indicating and turning, and parking, doing 3-point turns, reversing round a corner. These are all the tricky manoeuvres you have to do. The 3-point turn, that's where you're driving down the street and you realise you need to be driving the other way. So you have to turn the car, reverse a bit and turn again and carry on. That is a 3-point turn to go back 180 degrees. And then parallel parking is one of the worst things that we have to do, one of the most difficult things, unless, of course, you've got an automatic car that does it for you. And these days with the camera systems that we have in cars, it's much easier. But parallel parking is where you need to park the car in a space behind one car and in front of another car. And there is a space there. So you have to stop the car next to the car in front. You do that thing where you put your arm over the seat next to you and look over your shoulder. You're looking at all the mirrors and you turn the wheel and you move the car into the space. You turn the wheel the other way and you somehow try to slot the car into the space. You try to fit the car in. You try to fit the car into the space. So that's the literal meaning of fit in, meaning put something into a space, make it fit inside that space, to fit in. That's parallel parking. So literally his son is practicing parallel parking, trying to fit in, trying to put the car in the space. But also trying to fit in could have another meaning, which is where you do things to be the same as everyone else. You try to fit into society, try to fit in a social sense, meaning you try to match what everyone else is doing. Everyone else can drive. All his friends have got cars. They can all drive. So he needs to learn to drive. So in order to fit in with society, in order to be the same as everyone else, you need to learn to drive. And that involves practicing parallel parking. That's just a nice little double meaning, all packed into 3 lines. And as a father, I suppose that would be quite a significant moment. I mean, it's in a way, it's just an ordinary moment, helping your son to practice parking. But as a father, that can have some emotion attached to it, because obviously your son is coming of age and he's growing up, gaining his independence, going through a difficult experience that you went through, learning how to drive, and you're there trying to help him. And it can often be quite a charged experience, helping your child to learn to drive. It's very frustrating and difficult. It could be, you could imagine it would test the relationship. And it could cause arguments and friction. But at the same time, you might feel proud as well of your son learning to drive. So again, a little moment in everyday life And this poem allows you to kind of stop and think about it. Do you remember doing that, listeners? Parallel parking, right? Do you remember doing that when you learned to drive? How was it for you? Did you pass your driving test the first time? It took me 3 attempts to pass my driving test. What about you? And have you ever helped someone learn to drive? Have you ever helped your kids learn to drive? How was it? Was it awful? Did you end up shouting at each other? Haiku number 34 is simply one single line. All the words are all, it's all one single word. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words all squashed together with no spaces between them. And it goes like this. Jam-packed elevator, every button pushed. Jam-packed elevator, every button pushed. Again, one of those things that we all experience sometimes. Have you ever been to a department store on a Saturday and everyone packs into the elevator, everyone gets into the lift. So elevator in American English, lift in British English. The shop is so busy, everyone is squeezing into the lift. It's jam-packed. So jam-packed is a nice expression, just means that lots of people are inside. For example, trying to get on the metro on a Tuesday morning at rush hour, the metro is jam-packed, meaning full of people. The lift in the big department store in the centre of the city on a Saturday afternoon, the lift is jam-packed because everyone is squeezing inside the lift, and every button pushed. So you're there squeezed into this lift, every single button, meaning every floor, it has been pushed, and so the lift has to stop at every single floor. It is a sort of specific experience in modern human life, isn't it? To be squeezed into a jam-packed elevator or lift in some horrible department store, and then the lift stops at every single floor as people come and go. I think it's something we can all experience. We can all relate to that. Number 35. All new clothes waiting for the school bus. All new clothes waiting for the school bus. Nothing difficult to understand there. All new clothes waiting for the school bus. Very simple. Just how many words? 6, 7, 8 words. But again, it brings back a certain feeling, a certain memory. Do you remember your first days of school, or maybe your first day after the summer holiday, or your first day at a new school, and your mum or your mum and dad have bought you some brand new clothes for the school year? If you're in England, you might be wearing a uniform, brand new uniform. It feels uncomfortable. You haven't quite worn those clothes in yet, and you feel nervous. You're waiting for the school bus. I mean, I started a new school. I've started a few new schools. When we moved from London to the Midlands, I joined a school, a primary school in I can't remember what year it was. I think I was 9 years old. And I used to hate going to that school at the beginning, before I got used to it. And so I have distinct memories of the general dread that you would experience maybe on a Monday morning after the weekend, standing waiting for the bus, just dreading it. I used to hate going to that school. I didn't know the other kids. They all knew each other. I had a different accent. They would make fun of me and stuff. And it was just a horrible feeling standing there in my new school uniform waiting for this bus to arrive, and then sitting on the bus. I used to dread that time. Number 36. Autumn wind, the leaves are going where I'm going. Autumn wind, the leaves are going where I'm going. This one is brilliant, actually. This one is brilliant because, again, it's on 2 levels. On one level is that the writer is walking along. It's autumn, so it has that seasonal feeling that traditional haiku have. Autumn wind, the leaves are going where I'm going. So he's walking along it's an autumn day, it's windy, and maybe the wind is blowing in the same direction that he's walking. And so the leaves are being blown forwards in the same way that he's walking. I think it's something that we all experience, right? I mean, we've all walked through a park or something on an autumn day with wind, and leaves are being blown in different directions. Sometimes the leaves are blown behind you to the side, and sometimes you walk in the same direction that the leaves are going, which is it's a funny sort of feeling, isn't it? But also there's another meaning, a deeper meaning to this, isn't there? The leaves are going where I'm going. In autumn, leaves turn brown, they fall from the trees, and they decompose, right? They die. So there's more to it than that. It's also a little meditation on aging again. That not just that there are the leaves blowing forward in the same direction as you, but in a sense, the same thing is happening to the leaves that's happening to you, that you're getting older. Haiku 37. I said I read this one out in part 1, but I didn't talk about it. Thin winter coat, so little protection against her boyfriend. Thin winter coat, so little protection against her boyfriend. This one also is excellent, I think. Again, because there's several meanings going on here. So it's an observation. I think he's people watching. It's an observation of he's seen a girl outside. It's winter. It's cold. Her coat is very thin. So she's wearing only a thin coat, which offers very little protection. Presumably little protection against the cold. Right? Thin winter coat, so little protection. That's what we think of. She's wearing a coat, it's very thin, and so it's not protecting her against the cold, and so she's freezing. And then the last line adds a different dimension. So little protection against her boyfriend. So there's two possible interpretations here. Either she is physically against her boyfriend, meaning she's close to him because she's so cold. She's trying to stay close to him in order to stay warm because she's wearing this thin winter coat, so little protection against her boyfriend. Or this poor girl is in a toxic relationship, and the thin winter coat not only offers her little protection against the cold weather, but also, in a sense, this poor girl needs protection against her boyfriend. And it sort of describes a predicament. It just describes a moment where you see this girl, she's cold because she's not wearing the right coat, but also you get the sense that maybe her boyfriend is toxic and not good for her. You see what I mean? So he's observed this girl who not only is cold, but also is maybe suffering somehow from a toxic relationship with a boyfriend who is perhaps not treating her very well. That's what I understand from this, and that's why I think that's so clever. Maybe I can ask him about it this afternoon, as long as the call works and everything goes according to plan. I'm going to do that. I'm going to read some of the haiku and ask him about them. I hope he doesn't mind. I hope he won't mind me asking him to explain his work. I mean, work like poetry should speak for itself, really. I think he won't mind. He seems to be very gracious, so hopefully he won't mind my asking him questions about his haiku. We'll see. I must ask him about that one. Like, is that based on a real experience? Did he actually see a girl? What was the situation? And I also wonder if the double meaning is intentional, and is it supposed to be left open, or what? Or is there a specific thing he was trying to express there? Haiku 38, and by the way, there are about 10 more of John Stevenson's haikus before we go through some Lepster haikus. Haikus for Lepsters, not by Lepsters in this case. So this is number 38. One last look through the old apartment, a dry sponge. One last look through the old apartment, a dry sponge. A sponge is a thing that you would use to clean with. You have a sponge in the bath to clean yourself. It's a thing that absorbs lots of water. You have a sponge in the kitchen to clean your crockery, your knives and forks and cups and glasses and things. So a sponge. And yeah, again, a sort of evocative feeling that there's always a dry sponge. There's always a dusty, dry sponge sitting on a counter or something in an old apartment. It's interesting to me how he manages to sort of conjure up a certain feeling with a very brief description. One last look through the old apartment. So maybe this is an old apartment that he used to live in, or an apartment that someone else, maybe a father, parent, a relative used to live in, and the apartment's empty, except for just a couple of bits and pieces lying around. Maybe this is an apartment that they're selling, or an apartment that he used to live in that he's leaving, and he's moved all the stuff out, and there, lying on the side, is a dry sponge. Right? I mean, have you ever, you must have experienced that feeling, that one of those moments where you're in between different lives, right? You're moving out of one apartment and moving into another one, and you're leaving the old apartment that you used to live in. All your stuff has been removed, and there are things, weird little things, like, for example, where your desk used to be, there's like an imprint on the wall, a sort of slightly dirty imprint on the wall, which bears all the marks of the life that you lived in that spot. Or there are imprints on the floor from the chair that you used to sit on. At the space where your daughter's bed used to occupy, but now it's gone. But there are remains there that remind you of the old life that you lived in. Maybe there are all sorts of memories in this old apartment, and all that's left are sort of ghosts of those memories, like these little traces of your old life, and then something like a dry old sponge. It's always in those moments, those weird in-between moments, that you encounter a dry, dusty sponge on the floor or something like that. Is it just me? It can't just be me who, thinks of that when reading a haiku like that. Number 39, seeing it her way, it must have been lonely living with me. Seeing it her way, it must have been lonely living with me. This sounds like someone reflecting on a relationship, right? Someone reflecting on a relationship. Either he's had a conversation with a girlfriend, an ex-girlfriend, let's say, or even his wife, who he's still with. Let's say he's had a conversation with her, and after a long time, after a difficult time, they're having a conversation, and she is explaining what it was like for her. She was describing to him how it was from her position, and he finally gets some perspective on the relationship that he had, and he realizes, in probably quite a painful moment, that he wasn't a great boyfriend or husband sometimes, that he didn't give her the attention that she needed, that he was absent, emotionally absent. And even when you're in a relationship with someone, you can feel very lonely. And he's just realized, because he's seen the relationship from her perspective for some reason, and he's suddenly realized that it must have been very lonely living with him. So that's all about a moment of realization when you understand that you were perhaps emotionally absent in a relationship, and you suddenly become aware of how awful you were, which is a pretty humbling feeling. Seeing it her way, it must have been lonely living with me. Number 40, the tethered dog watches a guide dog enter the deli. The tethered dog watches a guide dog enter the deli. So this is like a little vision, or a little glimpse into the life of dogs. So there's two dogs in this one. The tethered dog, the tethered dog. A dog that is tethered, that means attached to maybe a lamppost or a hook on the wall. So dogs have collars. That's the thing that goes around the dog's neck. And attached to the collar is a lead or a leash in American English. We call it a lead. And when someone goes into a shop, they might tether or attach that lead to something outside the shop so that the dog doesn't run away and the dog doesn't come into the shop. And that, we've all seen that, a tethered dog sitting outside a shop, sitting there looking a bit sort of sorry for itself. And then this tethered dog sitting outside the shop watches as a guide dog walks into the shop. So a guide dog is a dog that helps a blind person, right? Someone who can't see properly. Often blind people will have a guide dog. This is a specially trained dog that helps to guide a blind person around. So this is like the lives of dogs. You've got the sort of normal dog who's not allowed to go into the deli, the food shop, and he has to sit outside and then watches a guide dog just walk straight in. And you can imagine the tethered dog would look sort of jealous or bemused, and it would probably think, how come that dog can go in but I can't go in? Just a little glimpse into the world of dogs. You've got this professional dog and this normal dog, and they don't have the same life at all. Number 41. Dad's life, just a little longer than Napoleon's. Dad's life, just a little longer than Napoleon's. This is an interesting one. This is like a meditation on the death of a parent, the death of a father. So his father has died, his dad has died, and you're kind of taking stock of your father's life, and you realise that he lived just a few years more than Napoleon did. Right? Again, just the sort of thing that gives you perspective on things. When you realise, wow, he lived long. His life was more or less the same length, in fact, a bit longer than Napoleon's. And Napoleon is this great figure from history, this significant person that everybody knows, that's studied in the history books, celebrated by some people, like a famous titan of history. And then there's my dad, who lived a life. For me, his life was as significant as someone like Napoleon. In fact, more significant. He lived longer than Napoleon. Yes, something about that. Something about taking stock of the significance of a parent's life and holding them up against, comparing them to some significant person from history. And for you, in your heart, your dad, who is maybe not a celebrated person, someone who's not going to be in the history books, is just as significant, in fact more significant than someone like Napoleon. Dad's life just a little longer than Napoleon's. 42. Very simple one. On top of everything, rain. On top of everything, rain. Again, a double meaning, right? The one meaning is that rain is literally on top of everything. Rain is falling on everything and everything's wet. But also on top of everything means on top of all the other problems and inconveniences in your life, which is sometimes how it feels when it rains. When you get caught in the rain, you're like, oh, that's the last thing I need. On top of everything, rain. Now it's raining. So on top of all the other problems that you're dealing with, it's also raining now. So on top of everything, rain. Just 5 words, but it somehow expresses that feeling of when you're sometimes overwhelmed by problems in your life, and then it rains. On top of everything, rain. 43. A change in their voices, children finding a fledgling. A change in their voices, children finding a fledgling. So a fledgling, listeners, is a baby bird, a bird that is just learning to fly. Maybe a bird that has fallen out of a nest. And again, just a very evocative description that you can imagine. He's maybe sitting on a chair while the little kids are playing in the garden. And, you know, the way that kids will talk while they're playing. They have a certain tone of voice. Maybe they're, let's go adventuring in the grass or something. And then they find this little baby bird and you hear an instant change in their voices as they sort of go, oh, look, oh, you know. A change in their voices, children finding a fledgling. Again, just a really nice description of a certain moment, listening to children, hearing a change in their voices. Number 44, alone again, making an event of a sandwich. Alone again, making an event of a sandwich. How can I try and describe this feeling? I suppose this is a feeling that you might have when you find yourself alone. Maybe it's a Sunday afternoon and for some reason everyone else has gone and there you are on your own and you think, I'm going to make a sandwich. And somehow that experience of making a sandwich for yourself becomes an event, meaning it becomes somehow a significant moment, a significant experience. And it's true. I mean, have you ever felt that? Where you're on your own, you think, right, well, I'm going to make my own lunch, and you think, I'll make a sandwich, and it becomes like a very lovely, big moment for you in the day where you prepare the bread, you put the slices of cheese in there, and then you do that and that. Oh, I can't explain that, but somehow I totally understand that. Alone again, that feeling of you're on your own, you're going to make yourself a sandwich, and it becomes a lovely, cosy, comforting, somehow quite significant moment for you where you make yourself a sandwich. Yeah. Number 45. Between my rush to be ready and her arrival, a space. Between my rush to be ready and her arrival, a space. So this for me captures a certain feeling where you've invited a girl to your place. You've invited a girl round. She's coming over for dinner. Okay? And there's that feeling of, I've got to get ready, getting the apartment ready, tidying it up, making it look nice, preparing some food, getting everything sorted, getting yourself in some nice clothes, making sure that you look okay. You're rushing to be ready. And then there's the moment of her arrival. And somehow between those things, there is an empty space where you don't quite know what to do with yourself. Getting ready and her arriving, and in between, there's a weird no man's land, a weird sort of limbo land. That space. Interesting space between your rush to be ready and your potential love interest arriving. What a weird space there is there. Yeah. Number 46. Tourist town, postcards of the waterfall racked upside down. Tourist town, postcards of the waterfall racked upside down. I imagine you can imagine this was taken in Niagara, right? Which is a town, I think it's in both Canada and the United States. It's right on the border and it's famous for its waterfall. Many of you will have visited. So it's definitely a tourist town with a famous waterfall. And you can imagine there would be shops selling postcards of the waterfall. But it just gives you a little glimpse into the, again, two different worlds. There's the world of the tourists who come to see the waterfall, and for them the waterfall is a huge attraction, a fascinating thing to travel a long way to come and see it. And then there's the people who live there who just use this tourist attraction to make a living. They're just selling stuff. They're just selling postcards and memorabilia, souvenirs of the waterfall. And they're just living their normal everyday lives, just trying to make a living. And they've put these postcards up, but they don't care really about the waterfall. And in their kind of careless attitude, they've put the postcards upside down. And it's weird. You see the postcards there, they're not the right way up. And you think, oh, the person who did that doesn't really care. But also it's weird because the water will be flowing upwards in all of these pictures. So something about the clash between the tourists who come to a place and they're fascinated by it, and the kind of mundane level of kind of boredom and not caring by the people who actually live in a place. I mean, it's a bit like that for me living in Paris. It's obviously one of the most visited cities in the world, but for me it's just a place where I just live my life, and I'm trying to get down the street, trying to rush to get to work or something, and there's tourists who are like, oh my god, wow, look at this, is that the Eiffel Tower? And I'm just like, oh, come on, get out of the way. So two different worlds living in the same place. Is it like that for you where you live? Do you have your normal everyday life that you maybe don't, you don't romanticize it, but then there are tourists who come to where you live, and for them everything's wonderful and fascinating and amazing? Is it the same for you? Number 47. This one's quite funny. Nude beach. His enormous sandcastle. Nude beach. His enormous sandcastle. This is really good because, okay, this tells a story, and there's a few things that I think that John is trying to say with this, I suppose. So one is he went to a nude beach. A nude beach. This is a beach where everybody's naked. A nudist beach or a nude beach. And there are beaches like this, right? In different places. They'll have a section of the beach or a part of the beach that's reserved for people who want to be naked. You have nudist beaches and nudist colonies as well, which is like little holiday destinations where you can go and relax and not wear any clothes. It's not something I would really want to do. But it's definitely a thing. So a nude beach. So John, apparently, I'm going to ask him about this. He went to a nude beach. And then the other thing, so nude beach, his enormous, you're thinking his enormous what? Because obviously it's going to be awkward when you go to a nude beach or a nudist colony, because you're going to see everybody's private parts, and it's going to be particularly embarrassing if one guy there has got enormous genitals, right? That's going to be obviously really obvious to you and probably quite awkward. But no, it's not his enormous what? His enormous genitals. It's his enormous sandcastle. But that tells a different story. So he went to the nude beach, he's naked, everyone else is naked, and then there's this one guy who built an enormous sandcastle. And you can imagine a nude man building a sandcastle. That's also going to be pretty awkward because he's bending over to dig in the sand. And so what an awkward experience of having to sit there while this man is bending over completely naked building a sandcastle. And maybe he has an enormous thing as well, which is even more awkward, isn't it? Yeah. Will I ask him about that? I think I should. I think I have to. I'll say, did you really go to a nudist beach? Is there a story to tell? See what he says. I've never met John Stevenson, so I've no idea how the conversation will go. I should probably stop talking about that because, as I said earlier, maybe the conversation won't be possible and I won't be able to do the podcast, but we'll see. I shouldn't count my chickens before they hatch. Number 48. This is the penultimate one. Border of sleep, the sound of nearby breathing. Mine. Border of sleep. So he's on the border of sleep. So he's lying in bed. He's just about to fall asleep. He's just in that weird in-between zone of being awake and being asleep, which is a wonderful place, I think. Border of sleep. That's where things start to go a bit weird in that moment. The sound of nearby breathing. mine. So he's lying in bed, he's about to fall asleep, he's aware of the sound of breathing, then he realises it's him breathing, which is a sort of weird thing that happens as you're falling asleep. And they're often like weird sensory things that happen, like you feel yourself slipping away, or you start to have a little dream, and then you kick your leg suddenly jerks in the bed. Or maybe you become aware of the sound of breathing, and then you realise it's you that's breathing. You've started to breathe kind of deeply, and then you drift off to sleep. So just capturing one of those very specific little moments in human life, just those weird little moments, like, for example, when you start to slip into sleep in your bed at night. And number 49, revising poems, a third cup of tea from the same bag. Revising poems, a third cup of tea from the same bag. This just tells me something about his process of writing, that he probably writes his poems and then revises them, meaning looks at them again and maybe rewrites a little bit here. I'm going to ask him about his writing process. But a third cup of tea from the same bag. So you just picture him sitting at his desk for quite a long time, brewing tea and just using the same bag again and again. Do you do that? Do you ever, if you make tea, do you keep the tea bag and use it again to brew another cup of tea? So that's the end of my selection of John Stevenson's poems, his haiku. I mean, very, very carefully written, evocative descriptions that capture certain interesting emotional spaces and common experiences that can actually, even though they can seem quite mundane in their everydayness, also carry with them quite profound feelings. You know, it's like that quote, life, what is it? Life is what happens when you're busy making other plans, which I feel like sort of explains the same thing, that you kind of realise you're living a life in certain little moments, like when you are looking around an old apartment and you see certain odd things that are a little bit out of place that bring back old memories, or you're people watching and you spot something, you see a little moment between two people that makes you realise that maybe there's something more going on. Or maybe you're falling asleep and you suddenly have a memory of a relationship and you suddenly realise why it didn't work and that maybe you're to blame, that for years you thought it was her fault. And then one day for some reason you realise, oh, I see. Yeah, I wasn't great. It must have been lonely living with me. So that's what I think is interesting about these, that they capture in such a brief and efficient way moments that are hard to put into words in other ways. And that is quite brilliant. And finally then, here are some haiku only for Lepsters. So I think if you are a true Lepster, listener to Luke's English podcast, then these ones will resonate with you in some way. So let me read these without offering any other comments. I'll just let you decide if they mean something to you. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section. And again, write your haikus in the comments section too. Just like last time, I was really impressed by the haikus from listeners. So feel free to do that again. Haiku for Lepsters then. Number 50. Morning earbuds in. A voice walks me through the woods. English wakes me up. Morning earbuds in. A voice walks me through the woods. English wakes me up. Let me know if any of these resonate with you at all. Number 51. English on the bus. A joke lands half a second late. Still, I laugh out loud. English on the bus. A joke lands half a second late. Still, I laugh out loud. Number 52. Late night listening. Words slow down my racing thoughts. Sleep learns English too. Late night listening. Words slow down my racing thoughts. Sleep learns English too. 53. Years of quiet doubt. Then suddenly I'm speaking. English says hello. Years of quiet doubt. Then suddenly I'm speaking English. No. Years of quiet doubt. Then suddenly I'm speaking. English says hello. 54. Train full of strangers. I laugh at something he said, but no one knows Luke. Train full of strangers. I laugh at something he said, but no one knows Luke. 55. Scrolling through the feed. Maybe today, I wonder. There it is. I smile. Scrolling through the feed. Maybe today, I wonder. There it is. I smile. Number 56. Bus stops, traffic jams. 3 hours, suddenly shrink. Long episode saved me. Bus stops, traffic jams. 3 hours, suddenly shrink. Long episode saved me. There's a total of 62 haiku. Okay. Number 57. I nod like I'm wise, understanding everything. Then someone else speaks. I nod like I'm wise, understanding everything. Then someone else speaks. I should probably explain that one a little bit. That's about the experience of my listeners who tell me that they listen to the podcast and they're very happy to discover that they can understand everything I'm saying, but then when one of my guests speaks, it's a different story. Number 58, laughing on the tram. I pretend I'm on a call. Very serious call. Laughing on the tram. I pretend I'm on a call. Very serious call. 59, episode finished. I check the length. Relieved. 2 hours. Thank you. Episode finished. I check the length. Relieved. 2 hours. Thank you. 60, clear voice in my ears, but chaos in the real world. I'll stay here a bit. Clear voice in my ears, but chaos in the real world. I'll stay here a bit. 61. A skeleton sits, headphones on, still listening, intro not done yet. A skeleton sits, headphones on, still listening, intro not done yet. And finally, that's the end of the Lepster haikus for Lepsters. But finally, I thought that we could end by going back to Helene from Canada. In fact, after telling me that she had plucked up the courage to write her email to me, she included these 2 haiku that she wrote in French, which I can translate. So the first one is Je t'écris un courriel, mon ombre joue du piano. Sorry about my pronunciation, but that's basically I'm writing you an email. I don't know if that's inspired by writing to me or writing to someone else, but anyway, it's a good one about writing an email. I'm writing you an email. My shadow plays the piano. I'm writing you an email. My shadow plays the piano. So she's writing on the keyboard. She looks over at the wall and she can see her shadow. It looks like she's playing the piano. That's nice. Le chat traverse le clavier. And then PP-up90SR87. The cat crosses the keyboard. PP-up90SR87. So basically, the cat crosses the keyboard and then you just get some random letters and numbers, which obviously are what the cat has done as it's walked across the keyboard. Its paws have accidentally written some letters and numbers randomly. The cat crosses the keyboard. PP09SR87. Okay, and that's the end of the introduction to this episode. An introduction to haiku in English. I hope you enjoyed it. One more comment from me, listeners. Now, when you've finished listening to this episode, when the episode is done and you have turned it off, just allow yourself some moments of silence. Don't listen to anything else. Just stop and allow yourself a few minutes of silence. No input or distractions. Just sit with yourself for a few minutes in silence and see what thoughts come to you. They might come in English. Just let them come and observe them, and maybe share them in the comments section. And to prove that you listened until this point, use the word silence in your comment. If you listened all the way up until this point, use the word silence in your comment. But yeah, just take a moment to sit in silence or stand or whatever. Just be silent, no other input, and just let whatever thoughts come, and observe the thoughts that arrive. It would be interesting to see what your brain comes up with. And if you want, leave a comment with the word silence to show that you've listened all the way up until this point and you're not a skeleton with headphones on. I'll let you decide how to do it. Don't forget to claim your certificate, which you will find on the episode PDF. I'm going to add that certificate for you right now. Okay, there it is. If you're looking at the PDF, you will see a certificate and medal award. This certificate certifies that I've listened to this entire episode of Luke's English podcast and I have the right to claim my 100 points. There you go. Okay, listeners, thank you very much for listening. I look forward to reading your comments. I don't have anything else to say at this point, so I hope you enjoy your few moments of silence after finishing this episode. And I'll speak to you soon, but for now, it's just time to say goodbye. Bye. Bye.